Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Tuesday Tips. I'm Marin Smith, content manager here at Grow Schools, and today we're here, like always, Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern, digging into what school leaders are dealing with right now. So today I'm excited to welcome Jen Svendsen from Edgility. Hi, Jen. Thanks so much for being here.
Hey everyone, I'm excited to be here and talking about one of my favorite topics, which is compensation in schools.
Nice. Yeah. And Jennifer works with schools on many things, but one of them is compensation strategy. And that's kind of what we're here to talk about today. So I know a lot of the schools, Jen, that we work with are in this position where they're planning to add a grade level, maybe open a new campus or expand a building, expand a program, but they haven't really thought through how their pay systems need to evolve alongside that expansion. So when compensation planning lags behind growth, schools can run into some challenges. So I'm excited to hear from you today. Let's start with the big picture. My first question for you is, what happens to compensation systems when schools grow? And why is strategic pay planning so critical when schools are expanding?
Yep. Yeah, that's a really good question. So what can happen when schools grow is that they outgrow their current compensation system. That can happen in a number of different ways, depending on how you're growing. If you're expanding and you're adding schools and adding roles, you may find that you need new job levels, that all of a sudden you've created a role or you need space for a role that's maybe a managing director and you've never had that role before. And so you need a job level to place that role into, and you need to figure out what that role is worth in the market so you can determine what that pay should be in the market. So that's one way that we see, or one thing that can happen as schools grow is that they have new roles that they've created and they don't have a place to place those roles on their current structure. So they kind of outgrow their structure. Other things that can happen is that you add new roles, but you're not sure what job level to place them in or what their value is in the market, or you add new duties and you need to determine kind of how you're going to recognize and reward those duties and potentially need to add stipends in order to be able to do that. So there's a number of ways in which schools can grow, add programs, and very quickly outgrow their structures. And so it's critical that when you're thinking about growth, that you're also thinking about being proactive with your structure and building your compensation structure so you can grow into the moment rather than outgrow the moment as you grow.
Yeah, really, really great points about sort of getting ahead of that. And my next question is sort of related, which is you talk a lot about growth and talent needs, or this idea of sort of building a foundation. So can you talk about what that actually looks like in practice when you're working alongside schools?
Yep. Yeah, so before you update any compensation program or compensation structure, you want to understand how you're going to grow and what that's going to mean in terms of your staffing needs and your talent needs. That becomes important in thinking about where does our structure, what is that moment our structure needs to meet. So if you're going to go from, let's say, 8 million in revenue and 80 staff, and in 3 years you expect to be 20 million in revenue and 160 staff, you want to be building a compensation program that's going to meet the future you, not the present you. So you want to be thinking about where is our staffing going to be in 2 to 3 years, and are we building our program so that we can grow into that compensation structure and be proactive rather than, again, outgrowing it and then having to be reactive. What happens when orgs are reactive is that they tend to make a lot of exceptions, and so that can erode staff trust, break down culture, and lead to issues with retention.
I love the way you put that, meeting the future you. That's a really great metaphor. Let me pause for a second to welcome anyone joining us mid-conversation. Jen Svendsen from Edgility Talent Partners is walking us through compensation strategy for growing schools and how to build pay systems that support expansion. rather than create problems. So you can catch all of our conversations on Tuesdays, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So back to the conversation with Jen. I have a couple more questions for you. Next is, how should schools approach listening to staff about compensation during growth periods?
Yeah, that's a really good question as well. So once you kind of know what your staffing model is going to look like and have anticipated talent needs and have an idea of how you're going to grow and what you need to plan for, you want to make sure that you talk to staff to understand their perspectives on how the growth has affected them, and if their salary is meeting the moment or not. And really, we recommend doing that in two different ways. One is through a survey, where you're going to collect quantitative data and collect those quantitative results, as well as through listening sessions. I kind of think of the survey as black and white. It tells you, a yes and a no, we're doing well here, we're not doing well here. It doesn't give you the color. The listening sessions are going to add the color to that black and white picture and tell you if you had scores. Let's say you had scores that came in for compensation, and those scores came in low. Listening to folks and understanding why, you might hear from them, well, a lot of exceptions have been made in the last 2 years as we've grown, and that has eroded trust, and we don't trust the system anymore, and that's why folks are leaving. So now you know the why behind kind of what you got from those quantitative results. And so recommend listening through the survey as well as through listening sessions, synthesizing those together, figuring out what you can tackle, creating an action plan, and then most critically is sharing it back with staff. Really important that staff feel heard, and that their voice is important in the process, and that they understand how you're going to address their concerns going forward, again, to continue to build trust, and build retention just through that.
Yeah. So can you talk a little bit about then, you have the listening session, then it's time to build your strategy. What is a growth ready compensation philosophy, and why does every expanding school need to have one?
Yep. So a growth ready compensation philosophy is, I always say, it's very high level. It sits up here and kind of acts as your North Star, and your main guidance for how compensation policies and practices are going to work within your school or organization. It should explain how salaries will be determined. It should give the why behind that, as well as explaining how salary determinations will be implemented in the future. So ensuring that as you grow, that you're keeping it consistent, that lots of exceptions aren't being made, and that that's really clear in your philosophy, that you're thinking ahead, planning ahead, and recognizing that growth, may cause some disruption, and that you've thought about that, plan for that in your compensation program, and that you're ready and going to act proactively to counter any disruption that could have happened.
Yeah. And so as you're trying to strike that balance, I imagine there's often a tension between paying competitively while also maintaining internal equity. Can you talk about how schools can ensure that they're doing that?
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I oftentimes with clients add a third lever in there. I think of them as levers. The first one is market competitiveness. The second one is internal equity. The third one we often add in is financial sustainability. And the reason we add them in is that pulling on any one of those levers might shift where the other lever needs to fall. And so if you're more market competitive, so you kind of push the gas on that, you might be less financially sustainable, right? And so really what you're working towards is, what is the right balance for my organization between market competitiveness, between internal equity, and between financial sustainability. From a market perspective, you want to go out, research where pay is in the market to understand what it means to be market competitive. And then you want to look internally and determine where are folks paid relative to each other. One thing that we hear a lot in focus groups and listening sessions is, I just heard this a few weeks ago with a charter school I'm working with, is new folks are coming in and they're paid more than I am, and I've been here longer. That's a pain point for staff. That erodes trust. And can lead to attrition when your long tenured staff get frustrated and decide to go somewhere else where they're going to feel more valued. And so while being market competitive is super important, you also want to keep in mind how folks are being paid relative to each other and what those internal equity pieces are, so that you're not bringing in new, less experienced staff at a higher pay rate than your current internal, more experienced staff. And so really critical to make sure you're keeping those two pieces in mind, as well as weaving in the financial sustainability piece to make sure that you're not paying, above and beyond what's sustainable for you.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Last question for you is, here at Grow Schools, we work a lot with schools to, get them money to expand their programs. We're helping them buy buildings. What should they start doing now? If you were to give us like sort of a soundbite or takeaway, let's say I want to expand within the next 1 to 3 years. What can I do now to take a step towards building these compensation strategies that you're outlining for us?
Yeah. So map out your growth, your projections as best as you can. Listen to staff, so the things that we've already talked about. And then from a market perspective, plan for the future. So go out and identify market parameters, which are your size, your sector, and your location. Determine them for today, determine them for 3 years from now. You might be adding locations, you might plan to add more staff, your budget may get larger. And so you want to make sure that you're thinking 3 years ahead. And where this becomes most critical is that oftentimes salaries for your frontline workers or your teachers and even your early career managers don't shift significantly when the school grows, but salaries for your leaders do, and salaries for executives do. And the last thing you want is for critical leaders to be leaving in the middle of a growth phase. And so if you plan 3 years ahead, you look at the market and say, okay, if we're using that example I had earlier, if we're now a $20 million organization with 160 staff, and what do other $20 million schools with 160 staff pay their executives? And if you're planning ahead and paying your executives in line with those larger schools, you're going to be in a better position to retain your executives throughout your growth phase. And really just show them that they're valued and you appreciate the work that they're doing as your school grows.
Well, Jen, I want to thank you so much for breaking this down with me today. You gave so many valuable insights for schools thinking about sustainable growth and, how to invest wisely in their teams. So you can catch us here again. Jen will be joining us again, and every Tuesday, 10 a.m. Pacific, 1 p.m. Eastern. So thanks, Jen, so much for joining us today.
Thank you. Take care, everyone.
All right. We'll see you next time.